So one day I ran outside and saw a watermelon, so I ran to it. I picked it up and then ran it back to my house to open it up the only way I knew how, with rubber bands. I put some rubber bands on it and then I got a sheet for when it breaks. And then I continued placing rubber bands on it with the help of my brother, and it was starting to actually work. I kept doing it, and then my brother drew a face on it. Henry! And then we just kept going until eventually we ran out of good rubber bands. So I was left with no choice but to run out in the rain, get in my car, and drive to Walmart. I got there, got my rubber bands, and then headed back home to get back to placing them. And eventually I could even see the indentation in the watermelon. And then I actually predicted it.
It's gonna bust.
When?
Any second.
Oh, God.
I just know it.
Instant replay. And it left this water rubber band. So one day after freezing a giant water balloon and it being hollow, people wanted me to do it bigger and better. And it was going to get colder, so I'm gonna. I let it fill up for even longer this time. And I was also going to let it sit for even longer. I zip tied it shut. And then let it sit and came back the next day to check it out. And I could stand on it. It was pretty frozen. We gave it another day and then came back out again. And the balloon had popped somehow, but the ice was still rock solid and I could stand on it, kinda. I ripped the balloon off, then pushed it over and it did that. And I threw the ice and it was really, really strong. It's pretty thick ice. Part 2, putting rubber bands on a watermelon. So it exploded and left us with this wad of rubber bands. So I decided to turn it into a rubber band ball with all the leftover rubber bands. I began by making the wad a lot neater and I discovered this.
There's watermelon inside this.
So I did my best to get it out and then kept making it neater and then eventually started placing actual rubber bands on it. And after a while I took a break to go shoot some hoops with it. And let's just say it's not a basketball and I ended up breaking my backboard more than it was already. And then I waited till the next day at like 2 in the morning to start trying to place more rubber bands on it. I finished my pile and started placing another bag, and eventually I was down to the last one. And to be honest, it was a lot of time for very little difference, but I got another bag anyway and started placing them. I finished it up and I had a ball, I guess. Let me know if I should even keep doing this. So one day someone said I should try to go to the pawn shop again, so I'm going to take my rubber band ball, this chain, and some other stuff. I put the ball in my car and then got my bling on and then went inside the pawn shop and said,
What's going on?
I'm back. Got a few more things.
Hey, what you got today?
Bling on this
Wow,
time.
that's blingy.
First off, I got this tiny rubber band ball.
Is this an offspring of that one?
Sure, yeah.
Having babies? What's up with that?
Want to buy it? I then told him I wanted $50 for it, and he said,
$50 for $5 worth of rubber bands? Better pass on that one.
So I then threw it and got out my genuine gold watch. And he didn't seem to think it was gold.
You got screwed.
Walmart, what a ripoff.
They do that to a lot of people.
Probably explains why it was like $10. And after that, I got out my chain and said it was probably worth.
Gold's probably worth about $30K.
He looked at me like I was crazy and then weighed it.
90 grams.
Is that a lot?
No.
Oh.
And he ended up passing on the chain, so I got out the rubber band ball. There was 80 pounds last time I brought it in, and now over 100.
You're a lot stronger than you look.
It would take a lot for me to let this thing go. What's your best offer?
You get $150 for it.
And I knew I couldn't do it. So I threw the ball down and headed out, knowing I'll probably never sell it. Part 3 of making a rubber band ball. So this watermelon exploded and left us with this wad of rubber bands. So I turned it into this actual rubber band ball, and now we're here and I'm out of rubber bands, so I went to Walmart. I got some rubber bands and then went home and emptied them out and opened up a bag. And got busy. But after a little bit I left and then came back the next day. And finished off the pile. And then I dumped out 2 more bags and started placing them. But I got bored and ended up leaving and coming back again the next day to finish it all off. I placed rubber bands forever and then I went outside to test it out on my broken hoop. Yeah, it was hard to play with, but it bounced really high. Here's it next to a basketball. Yeah. After that, I went back inside to finish off the pile, and then I dumped out another 2 bags and started placing rubber bands for what felt like an eternity. And I was finally down to the last bag. I put them all on, and I was done. And it's pretty big, but it's going to take like 1,000,000 likes for me to keep going. So after destroying our microwave with my 100-pound rubber band ball, someone left a comment saying to do a phone. But first, I'm going to do this broken TV my neighbor gave me. I put the ball on there and threw it. And it didn't do very much damage, so I just threw it again. And it mainly just bounces on it, so I stepped on it a bunch and then got out a giant snowball that was left over. And that was pretty cool and left me with a snowball. And then I got out the phone. I set it down, then threw the ball on it, but it missed, so I threw it again. And it cracked it. Look at it. I'm just kidding, this is a fake phone. It's actually smashed now. Part 4 of making a rubber band ball. So this watermelon exploded and left us with this wad of rubber bands, and I've been adding a lot of rubber bands to it. And I said it would take 1,000,000 likes for me to keep going, and it got 4,000,000. So I went to Walmart, got more rubber bands, and then left, went home, set them down, and opened them up. And then the next day, I got on that rubber band grind, placing the entire pile on the ball. And when I was done, I left and came back again later to place another bag on. And once I finished that ball, it was pretty big, like the size of my head. I weighed it, and it weighed 5 pounds. And it also bounced pretty high, and made a decent basketball for my broken hoop. And after that, my brother wanted to play some bands, so I let him. But he gave up, and I ended up having to finish his pile off. And after that, I only had one more big pile left, so I dumped it all out and started placing them. I finished it up and then started on the bag of thicker rubber bands. And now I'm out. This sucked a lot, and since the last post got like 4 million likes, it's going to take like 5 million likes now for me to keep going. See how much a pawn shop would give me for my rubber band ball. So I got in my car and drove out to one, but it was closed for another 30 minutes. So I waited, ate a burrito, and then went back in and said,
I got this rubber band ball.
Okay.
I want to sell for $200.
Why do you think it's worth $200?
I put a lot of time into it. It's a lot of rubber bands,
How many rubber bands are in there?
like 14 bags.
How many is in a bag?
I have no idea. But it weighs 6.5 pounds.
Wow, does it bounce? Wow, bounces pretty good. Well, how old are you?
16.
You got to be 18 before you can do anything with it.
and then he said he'd give me $100 for it if I counted all the rubber bands and had someone 18 sell it for me. So I thought about it and said,
200.
No, I can't go 200 on it, but it'd be worth just watching you count that many rubber bands for $100.
500.
I couldn't get $500 out of a rubber ball.
How much do you think you could sell this for?
$50.
I'm gonna have to walk.
All right. Appreciate you coming in.
So then I walked out with my rubber band ball, and I guess I'm just going to have to keep adding bands. Part 5 of making a giant rubber band ball. So I've been making this rubber band ball, and I ran out of rubber bands, so I went to Walmart. Got a bunch more rubber bands, and then I went home, dumped 2 bags out, put some gloves on so I didn't break my skin again, and started placing the bands. And then left and came back the next day to finish off the pile. It looked pretty good so far, and then I forgot to video placing a whole nother bag. But it looks like this, and then I dumped out all the colored rubber bands and started placing them all on the rubber band ball. And I was done, and it was almost the size of my head and weighed 8.2 pounds. And bounced pretty high. And also made a decent basketball, like if you want me to keep going. So one day, my brother and his friend had an idea to take all the ball pit balls from my storm shelter and put them all in our friend Joe's office, who's an insurance agent. So we transported them all to the office, and we had to put them all in here. But first, I spun around in the chair a little bit, and then got to pouring, and we poured out all the ball pit balls, and it was completely covered. I set the GoPro up, we shut the lights off and left, and he was supposed to come back in the morning, but he actually ended up coming in at midnight, and here was his reaction.
What the hell is this? No way. You guys got one this time. Next time, it's not gonna happen.
He then messaged me, so I zoomed over there to get his reaction.
What were you doing back here?
What do you mean? I come back all the time.
Here it is, completely covered.
Dylan, you're still recording me?
So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it now weighs 8.2 pounds, but I want it bigger, so I went to Walmart, got a bunch more rubber bands, then went home, dumped them out, put some gloves on, then emptied out 2 bags of colored rubber bands, and got busy placing the entire pile. And after I finished the colored rubber bands, I dumped out 3 bags of normal rubber bands and placed that. I placed a bunch, but then left and came back the next day to place some more. It got tiring, and I placed a lot of rubber bands, so I left, took another break, and came back and started on it again. I was sure to place the whole bag this time, but I got too tired and had to leave and come back again the next day to finish it off. So that's what I did, and I finished it up. And it was done. It weighed 10 pounds, was bigger than my head, and bounced pretty high. Like if you want me to keep going. So one day, my friend and I went out to this giant snow pile in the middle of a parking lot to build a giant igloo. We got to digging for a long time. He would dig out the hole, and I would scrape it out with the big shovel like this. We repeated this process for quite some time until eventually it looked like this. We were starting to make our way in, and it was starting to look like an igloo. And our next goal was trying to make it taller so we could easily dig. And after a lot more time, we got it looking like this, but we still had more to go. It had been over an hour, and we were just throwing snow everywhere. Then we saw this truck drifting in the parking lot, and here's our progress so far. We accidentally put a hole in the roof. Here it is. But it's a pretty big igloo that you can even stand up in. But the sun was coming down, so we had to leave, like if we should keep going. Part 7 of making a rubber band ball. So I've been making this ball, and it's pretty giant now and weighs 10 pounds. But I wanted it bigger, so I went to Walmart, got a bunch of colored rubber bands, then went home, dumped them out, put my gloves on, and first finished off the pile of normal rubber bands that was already on the table. And once I was done with that, I dumped out all the bags of colored rubber bands and began placing them. I did this for quite a while, and the ball was finished, and it was huge. And it now weighs 11.9 pounds and is almost the size of a basketball. And it also bounces pretty high. And I also shot it in the hoop. And now I'm officially finished with it. It looks pretty cool. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it now weighs 11.9 pounds and is the size of a basketball. And I was going to stop, but everyone wanted me to keep going, so I went to Walmart, got some more bands, then went home, dumped them out, put some gloves on, and got back at it. I started by placing the pile of colored rubber bands because it's easier to place, and once I was done with that, I weighed it, and it was 12.9 pounds, and still bounced pretty high, and made a good basketball. Then I went to Walmart to get more colored rubber bands, but they were out, so I just got the normal ones and went home, dumped that out, and placed that entire pile. I finished it off, and it was now 13.4 pounds, and still the size of a basketball, and still bounced pretty high. Like if you want me to keep going and just see how big I can make it. So one day someone commented for me to tie 4 bottles of Diet Coke and Mentos together and then throw it. So I got Diet Coke, Mentos, and tape, and then I was going to tie these 4 bottles together. I got the tape out, wrapped it all the way around, then put the Mentos in, one by one, and all the bottles, 3 each, then took it out of the cul-de-sac and threw it. And it did nothing. So I threw it again, and it did that. It was kind of a fail, but I just threw 2 bottles separate, and it did that, which was kind of cool. And then I wrapped 2 bottles together, thinking maybe that would work better, and it did a little bit, but not really. So then I threw another one, and yeah. So one day someone commented for me to freeze an egg in a block of ice and then shoot it out of my giant slingshot. So I put it in a cup of water. I added tape over the top, then put it in a freezer, and the next day it was rock solid. I then ran it under some hot water and got it out of the cup. And it was ready to launch. The only problem was the egg was stuck in the corner, but I'll just aim for the other side. I put it in the slingshot, pulled back, and launched. And this shot was kind of bad, but it landed, and I ran to it, and pretty much nothing happened. So I put it back in the slingshot for round 2, and it hit this tree. Well, bam. I went out to it, and the egg looked fine at first, but that was only because it was frozen. The egg was actually cracked. So then I just threw it against a tree and then found a bat and obliterated it. Sort of. The egg was still intact. So then I just ate it. So one day I decided to take my 12.9 pound rubber band ball and see how high it would bounce off a building. But first in the street, and then in the hoop. And then I got a ladder and climbed up to the roof of my house with the ball to throw it off. I threw it off, and it bounced pretty high and went into the yard. And then I tried to go up even higher to throw it off and just dropped the ball and almost took out my brother. And then I went down so I didn't fall off. I put the ball in my car and took it to a parking garage to throw it off that. I walked up there and tossed the ball off. Yeah, it bounced pretty high. And then I went back up all cinematic with the ball, ran around, and then I fell. But I got back up, took my ball to the edge and bounced it off. And then celebrated. Full vid will be on my YouTube. Rubber band ball part 9. So a lot of people don't know that it started when this watermelon exploded and left me with this wad of rubber bands. And ever since then I've just been adding on to it, and this is the entire compilation up until now. And I needed more colored rubber bands, so I went to Walmart, but they were out. So I got gas and went to a different Walmart. But they were out too, so I went to another one and they finally had some. Then I went home, dumped out a bag, and then got busy placing the entire pile of rubber bands until I was done. And then I left and came back later. I dumped out the colored rubber bands and placed that entire pile. Then I found some more rubber bands in the floor, placed those, and then placed a bag of thicker rubber bands that I also found in the floor. And I was done. It now weighs 14.7 pounds, is the size of my head, and bounces pretty high. And it's also bigger than a basketball, like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and it's pretty big now, but everyone wanted it bigger, so I went to Walmart to get more bands, but they were out, so I went to a different Walmart and got some. Then went home, set down a pile of bands, and got busy placing the entire thing until it was done. And then I dumped out a few more bags, and first placed the bag of smaller rubber bands, and then the bags of thicker rubber bands until I was done with that. And it now weighs nearly 16 pounds, and still bounces pretty high, but it's hard to catch now, and it makes a decent basketball. Like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and people seem to never want me to stop, so I went to Walmart, got a bunch more rubber bands, and then went home to start placing them. I dumped out the little bags first and began placing all of those until I was done, which took a while. Then I left and came back later to place all of the colored rubber bands, which took even longer, but now it looks pretty. I left again and came back to place the last bag of thicker rubber bands, and it was finally done. And it now weighs 17.5 pounds, is bigger than my head, and is pretty hard to catch when you bounce it. And now it's noticeably bigger than a basketball, like if you want me to continue this ball. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and to be honest, at this point I'll probably never stop. So I went to Walmart, got a bunch more rubber bands, then left, went home, dumped out all the colored rubber bands, and began placing them. Until I was done with the entire pile, which took a while. But I did it, then took a break and came back later to start on the pile of normal rubber bands. And I placed that entire pile covering all the colored rubber bands. So sad. Then took another break, came back and dumped out all the thicker rubber bands and began placing them until I was out. And the ball now weighs 19.2 pounds and is a lot harder to throw and way harder to make a basket with. Yeah, it's pretty big, so like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball and it's getting pretty huge and I'm probably not stopping. So I went to Walmart, got all the colored rubber bands they had, then went home, dumped out the bag of normal rubber bands and placed that entire pile, which was kind of hard because of how big the rubber band ball is now. Then I took a couple days off and came back to place all 8 bags of colored rubber bands, which took a long while. But eventually I finished, and it's huge now. It weighs 21.6 pounds, and is a lot harder to throw and catch than it used to be, and almost impossible to make a basket with, like if you want me to keep going. So I've been making this rubber band ball for way longer than I thought I'd be, and I'm just going to keep going. So I went to Walmart, and they were out of rubber bands, so I left and came back a few days later, and they had some. I went home, dumped them all out into a pile, and started placing them. And it's honestly just so satisfying to watch the pile go down. And when I was done, I left and came back later with a new bag that I ordered on Amazon. And the band seemed good, so I placed the entire pile until I was done. And it now weighs 23.6 pounds, is way bigger than my head, and it's really hard to throw, and even harder to make a basket with. But I made one. Like if I should keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and I'm just going to keep adding rubber bands every time Walmart restocks. So I went there, got a few more bags of colored rubber bands, then went home and started with the 2 bags I ordered on Amazon. I placed the entire pile until you couldn't see a colored rubber band in sight. And then I left and came back later to place the colored rubber bands I got at Walmart. And I placed it until I was done. It's huge and now weighs almost 26 pounds, is super hard to throw and really hard to catch, but I can still make a basket with it and even stand on it now. Well, kinda. Like if you think I should keep going. So as you probably know, I've been making this giant rubber band ball, and I needed more rubber bands, so I went to Walmart. But they were out of the ones I needed, so I went to a different Walmart, and they had some. Then I went home, dumped them all out, and got busy. And sped up, this all just looks really cool. Anyway, I finished that pile, and took a break and came back later to finish this bag I ordered. And sadly, it's a lot less colorful now. But I'm done, and it now weighs 28.3 pounds, and bounces decently, and I also made a basket. Like if I should keep going. So I've been making this giant rubber band ball for quite a while now, and I'm out of rubber bands, so I went to Walmart, and they had so many colored rubber bands. I got them, and then went back to carry even more, and then left. I went home and started with this pack I ordered, and I placed the entire pile. And done. And then I took a break and came back later with all the colored rubber bands. I dumped them all out into a pile, which was a lot, and got busy placing them for what felt like an eternity, because this was probably the biggest pile I've ever placed. And it's huge. It now weighs 30 pounds, is way bigger than my head, is pretty hard to throw, and almost impossible to make a basket with, and I can even stand on it. Like if you think I should keep going. So this is part 18 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I'm just going to keep going. So I went to Walmart and got like 9 packs of colored rubber bands, then left, went home, and dumped them all out into a giant pile, and got busy placing them. And I placed the entire pile, which took quite a while. And then I left and took a break and came back later with this bag. I dumped it out and placed that entire pile. And eventually I was done. And it weighs a lot. It's bigger than my head. It's pretty hard to make a basket with. I can stand on it and really hard to throw. Like if you think I should keep going. So as you know, I have this giant rubber band ball, but now I want to make a little rubber band ball to show you how. I first wadded up a clump of bands and then wrapped them around each other until I had this. And then I started doubling up bands and adding them to the clump for a while until I had this. And after that, I just kept on going until I got to this. And it's pretty neat and bouncy. I went on for quite a while after this until it looked like this. And it's pretty cool and weighs a lot less than my other one, weighing 0, and this one weighing 28. And it's not even close to the size of my head. Here's me throwing the big one, and now here's me throwing the small one. Now a basket with the small one, a basket with the big one, eventually. And throwing the big one, and throwing the small one. I had to run after it. Yeah, they're both pretty cool. So I'm back at it again with the rubber band ball, and I need more rubber bands again. So I went to Walmart and counted out like 12 packs of rubber bands in the floor, and then grabbed them all and went home. And I first started with the pack I ordered on Amazon to match the surface of the ball, and after I was done with that, I took a break and came back later to place all the colored rubber bands. I dumped them all out into a pile, which was a lot, and then began placing them for quite a while until I was done. And the scale said it weighed 39 pounds, so I double checked on another one and it said the same thing. It's really hard to throw and officially impossible to make a basket with now, but I can stand on it, kinda. Like if you think I should keep going. So I'm now to part 20 of this, which is crazy, and I'm just gonna keep going. So I went to Walmart and bought all the colored rubber bands they had, then went home and dumped them all out into a pile. And then I got busy placing them until I was done with that pile. Then I got the 2 packs I ordered, dumped them all out into a pile, and began placing them until the ball was finished. And it now weighs an astounding 42 pounds. It is very hard to bounce now, and its basketball days are just over. But I am getting better at standing on it, so that's cool. Like if you want me to keep going. So I'm now on part 21 of this rubber band ball, and no one ever seems to want me to stop, so I went to Walmart and bought all the colored rubber bands they had. Then I went home and started out with the bag I ordered on Amazon, and I placed that entire pile. And then I took a break, as usual, and came back to place all the colored rubber bands. And I dumped them all out into a pile and then placed it all, which took quite a while, but I finished, and it now weighs 45 pounds. Could probably take me out, and I broke my already broken basketball goal with it. But hey, I can stand on it. And like if you want me to keep going. So one day I got this comment that said to throw my rubber band ball off a hill, so I put it in my car and drove on out to a hill. I got out and carried it on up the hill, which was hard because it weighs 30 pounds, and I got to the top and threw it off. And it bounced and bounced and then started rolling, and it started bouncing again towards the bottom and went on out into the parking lot and just kept on going. And eventually I had to chase after it and jump over a fence, and I had it. And then we went back up the hill to try it again from this angle. And it went on down pretty steady, and then it looked like it was going to hit my car. And I got kind of nervous, so I started to chase after it. But it barely missed it and just went on out into the field. So I'm now to part 22 of this, and everyone just wants more, and more. So I went to Walmart and bought more. I bought all the packs of colored rubber bands I could carry, and then I went home and dumped them all out into a pile, which was a lot. And then I got busy placing all the bands, which took so long I almost quit. But I didn't, and it's done and now weighs 48 pounds. And it's like 3 times the size of my head and can even crush a can of Flex Seal. Wow. And I'm also able to fully balance on it now, like if I should keep on going. So it's now part 23, and I'm really starting to think it's never going to end. But that's okay. I went to Walmart and, bought a bunch of colored rubber bands, then went home, dumped them all out into a nice pile, and then I started placing them. And it's to the point now where the bands sometimes break, and it hurts. I took a break, as usual, and came back to place this bag I ordered on Amazon. And I placed it, and the ball now weighs over 51 pounds. Could probably kill a bear, and is no longer a good basketball. More like a chair. Here's it next to a basketball. And here's my trick chat. Ooh, like if I should keep on going. So it's now to part 24 of making this rubber band ball, and I went to Walmart and got more colored rubber bands. I got a bunch and then went home and started out with this new pack I ordered on Amazon. They're pretty cool and more stretchy than the normal colored rubber bands. I placed that entire pile and then took a break and came back to place all these other colored rubber bands. I dumped them out into a pile and then placed the entire thing until I was done. And I also ordered this little rubber band ball just for fun to look at and stuff. The big one now weighs 55 pounds and is pretty hard to get down the stairs. And compared to the little one, they bounce similar, but I can stand on this one and not on this one. And I can toss this one, but not this one. Like if you want me to keep on going. So one day I decided to take my giant water balloon and throw my rubber band ball on it to see if it would break it. I set it down in the yard, tied the zip tie and hose around it, and then let it fill up until it was all the way full. Then I took the hose out, sealed it again, and put the rubber band ball on it. And it just kind of rolled off at first, so I dropped it on it, and it stood up. So I threw it on it, and it busted. Here's a slow-mo. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of damage. Let me know any other ideas you have. So I'm now to part 25 of this giant rubber band ball, and everyone just wants more and more. So I ordered these new rubber bands on Amazon, and they were way too small. So I got sad, and then I went to Walmart and bought a bunch of colored rubber bands, and then went home. Then I, dumped them out into a pile and started placing them, which took longer than usual for some reason. But I finished, then took a break and came back later to place these other colored rubber bands I ordered. I placed that entire pile, and the ball kind of looks like Spider-Man now, and weighs 57 pounds. I took it downstairs and outside, then threw it and sat on it, and it's also way bigger than my head, and I can stand on it. So, like, if you want me to keep going. So I'm now to part 26 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I'm gonna keep on going. I ordered these bigger rubber bands on Amazon, and they weren't as small as the last ones, but they were still really hard to stretch around the ball. And I dumped them all out into a pile and placed it, and it was harder to place than any other pile I've ever placed. And it was exhausting, so I left and came back the next day to place 2 more packs of them. And I placed that pile, and it now weighs 61 pounds. I took it downstairs and compared it to this ball, then threw it, and then stood on it, kinda. More like sat on it. Anyway, like if you want me to keep on going. So I'm now all the way to part 27 of my rubber band ball, and I need more bands, so I ordered these big rubber bands and started placing them. And these bands are really hard to place, so this was really exhausting. So I took a break and then came back later to place these colored rubber bands and make it look good. I placed the entire pile and it now weighs 65 pounds. I let it roll out to the cul-de-sac, picked it up, threw it down, then tried to stand on it, then threw it again, and then my brother tried to stand on it. And like, if you want me to keep on going. So one day I decided to take my giant 70-pound rubber band ball to an abandoned water park to throw it down a giant water slide. I walked around trying to figure out where the slide dropped off and figured out it dropped off right over there. So I went down there to make sure it was retrievable and it seemed doable. So I got the rubber band ball, took it up a bunch of stairs, and it was ready to go. On down this old abandoned slide. But first I wanted to try out this little one. So my brother went down there to film and I threw the ball. And it went pretty fast, so I kind of lost track, but it went all the way down and out. My brother picked it up and then I was ready to send the big one down. And I pushed it off and it went down pretty hard and was making a lot of noise. It went around the curve and then I could see it going through the tunnels. It was going really fast and started making even more noise, so some people started yelling. But despite that, the ball prevailed on and went all the way out. And here's my brother's perspective. That was cool. And then I lugged my rubber band ball home. So it's now to part 28 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I ordered more rubber bands. I dumped them out and placed them. And when I was finished with that, I got out these garbage bag rubber bands that I ordered that are also pretty colorful. And then I placed another pile of those ones. And it now weighs 68 pounds. I took it downstairs, out to the yard, into the cul-de-sac, and look at it next to a basketball. Ordinary basketball and hoop, rubber band ball and hoop. Tossing basketball, tossing band ball. But I can stand on this one, like if you want me to keep on going. So it's now part 29 of this rubber band ball, and I guess I'm just going to keep going. I ordered another box of these thick rubber bands and put the whole pile on my ball. I then took a break and came back later to place all these colored rubber bands that are also supposed to be garbage bag rubber bands. I placed the entire pile and it was done. And it's now 72 pounds. I rolled it downstairs, outside, and into the cul-de-sac. Here it is in comparison to my head, and here's me trying to throw it. And look, the basketball hoop fell over, but I can stand on it. And like if you want me to keep on going. So I've been making this rubber band ball for a long time, and it's now part 30. And I ordered another pack of these big rubber bands and placed the entire pile. And after I was done with that, I got the pile of even more of these big colored rubber bands than I did last time. And when I was done with that, the ball was looking pretty good at 76 pounds. I took it out to the street, picked it up, and threw it the best I could, and then tried again. And I ended up just laying on it and then standing on it. So, like, if you want me to keep on going. So I'm now to part 31 of making this giant rubber band ball, and I got another package. I dumped out this pack of pretty big rubber bands and placed the entire pile. And then, like I did last time, got a bunch of these colored garbage bag rubber bands and placed them all. And these ones placed pretty good. I finished and the ball now weighs 81 pounds. I took it downstairs and out to the cul-de-sac where I compared it to my head and then got up and tried to throw it. And then I tried to throw it behind me and then stood on it. And even tried to ramp it, but just broke the ramp. So, like, if you want me to keep going, and comment any ideas you have for it. So one day someone commented that I should cover my rubber band ball in Flex Seal, and seeing as I broke it and it needed a little bit of fixing because there's glass shards on it, I thought, why not? So I rolled it out to my yard and started spraying it. I sprayed all around it until it was done. Actually, I gave it a little bit more and then let it sit. And the next day I came back and it had rained, but it was still solid compared to the side that wasn't Flex Seal. I picked it up and took it out to the cul-de-sac and it bounced the same and was just kind of stale. I rolled it into the basketball goal, boom, then stood on it, and let me know what else I should do. So now to part 32 of this rubber band ball, and I'm probably never stopping, honestly. I bought another one of these packages, put it in a pile, and placed it. And then I got out all the colored rubber bands that are actually meant for garbage cans. And I placed that entire pile as well, and the ball now weighs 84 pounds. And I took it out to the street, and because my wrist is kind of hurt, I couldn't really pick it up, but here's it next to a basketball, and then we walked off together in the sunset, like if I should keep on going. So I'm now all the way to part 33 of this giant rubber band ball, which is insane. And I got another box. I placed this entire pile of rubber bands, which wasn't that bad, and then dumped out all these colored garbage bag rubber bands. I had them in a nice pile and then placed them all one by one until I was out. And it now weighs over 90 pounds. I took it out to the cul-de-sac and tried the best I could to pick it up and throw it. And then I stood on it, and this time I actually didn't fall off it. I jumped, and here it is next to my head, and here it is rolling. Like if you want me to keep on going. So I'm now all the way to part 34 of this giant rubber band ball. And it's getting kind of redundant, but I'm going to try to keep it interesting. I ordered these bands, placed them on, you know. Then I got the other pile, which is these colored rubber bands that I actually have to untie first and then place them on the ball. And after placing this entire pile, it now weighs almost 95 pounds. I struggled to make it out to the cul-de-sac. And it's so heavy it even picked up grass. Then I picked it up and threw it. And look at it in freeze frame. Look how big it is. It's so big, there's really not much you can even do with it. Here's it next to a basketball. Here's it crushing one and then falling off. And then me trying to stand on it, but failing and crushing the basketball goal. So like if I should keep on going or comment what I should do. So I'm now to part 40 of my giant rubber band ball, and I wanted to walk you guys through the entire process. I take it upstairs and into this room where I sit down and place rubber bands. I'm actually running out of the type of rubber bands I can place because these ones are just too tiny and break on me. And these ones are just getting old and I have to untangle them every single time. But no worries, I found this random custom rubber band site on the internet and called them up. Yo, I need your 15-inch rubber bands. I'll place an order for like 25 pounds. And just like that, $200 worth of rubber bands was on the way. But for now, I'm going to place these ones. I put them in a pile and then untied them all and got to placing them. And I placed the entire pile of colored rubber bands until I was all out. And after that, I took it downstairs, which was a struggle, but I got it. And I weighed the ball in at 113 pounds. I then took it to the street to try to pick it up. And I can get it up to here, but it's too heavy to get over my head. So I just laid on it, like if you want me to keep on adding bands. So one day, someone commented to drop my rubber band ball from somewhere high. And I don't live anywhere where I can really do that, because it weighs 65 pounds and could hurt someone. So I took it to this abandoned race car track, took it to the second story, and dropped it. And it bounced and then just rolled into the ground. And I was like, I gotta do something else. So I went down to this pipe and I'm like, can I put it in there? So I looked and it just gradually got smaller. So my ball would have got stuck. Glad I didn't do that. But I just ended up throwing it off and it bounced off into the fence. And it got this mark on it. Oh well, let me know what else I should do with my rubber band ball. So I'm now to rubber band ball part 43 and I got another box of rubber bands. I dumped them out and these bands are even thicker than the last ones. I then dumped out another bag and got to placing them. And it was way easier to place these bands because they're twice as thick and I got a lot more done with less time. I finished it up and then I took it all the way downstairs to weigh it and it weighed in at 149 pounds. I then took it out to the street to try to pick it up and just look at it next to my head. It's huge and I couldn't pick it up. Like if you want me to keep on going.